your transmission is acting strange. Delayed shifts, strange noises, maybe even stuck in one gear. 3 different shops might give you 3 completely different diagnoses ranging from $150 to $2,500. Here's what most won't check first: a transmission shift solenoid, a tiny electronic part that fails more often than mechanics admit. I'm about to show you the 9 telltale symptoms and the single diagnostic mistake that wastes your money. Before we get into the symptoms, hit that subscribe button. This channel exists to save you from unnecessary repairs, and today's video could prevent a misdiagnosis that costs you hundreds or even thousands in repairs you don't actually need. Let me break down what's happening inside your transmission when you shift gears. A shift solenoid is an electromagnetic valve, about the size of your thumb, that controls the flow of transmission fluid through narrow channels in the valve body. Your car's computer, called the Transmission Control Module, sends electrical signals to these solenoids dozens of times per second. When a solenoid receives that signal, it opens or closes, directing pressurized fluid to engage the correct gear. Most modern transmissions have 4 to 7 of these solenoids working together. Here's where problems start. These solenoids operate in an environment that's hostile to electronics: constant heat up to 250 degrees Fahrenheit, vibration, and exposure to contaminated fluid. They fail in 2 ways. First, electrical failure. The internal coil burns out from heat cycling. When this happens, the solenoid stops responding to the computer's commands entirely. Second, mechanical failure. Old, degraded transmission fluid contains metal particles and clutch material dust. This debris gets into the solenoid's tiny passages and clogs the plunger, making it stick partially open or closed. Both failures create the same end result: the wrong amount of fluid pressure in the wrong place at the wrong time. Your transmission starts doing unpredictable things. Now, here's what you need to understand before we go through the symptoms. Many of these signs overlap with other transmission problems. That overlap is exactly why misdiagnosis happens so often. Pay attention to the patterns I'm about to describe. They're the difference between a $45 part and a $2,000 rebuild you might not need. Symptom number 1, the phantom neutral drop. This one feels terrifying when it happens. You're driving normally, maybe cruising at 40 miles per hour, maybe decelerating for a turn, and suddenly the car feels like it dropped into neutral. The engine RPMs jump, but there's no power going to the wheels. The car just coasts. Then a second or two later, it slams back into gear. Here's the mechanism. A shift solenoid that's failing intermittently will randomly release hydraulic pressure from the clutch pack that's holding your current gear. When that pressure drops, the clutch disengages. You're literally between gears. Not in neutral exactly, but not in any gear either. The transmission computer detects this, recalculates, and re-engages the gear, which is why you feel that sudden catch a moment later. This happens most often when you're decelerating, because that's when the transmission is actively downshifting, and multiple solenoids are switching states rapidly. Watch your tachometer during normal driving. If you see the RPM needle spike by 500 to 1,000 RPM for no reason, you didn't press the gas, you're not going uphill, and the car momentarily feels powerless. That's your warning sign. The danger here is this symptom means a solenoid is on the edge of complete failure. Ignoring it leads to excessive slipping, which generates heat. Heat destroys the friction material in your clutch packs. What starts as a $200 solenoid replacement becomes a $2,500 internal rebuild once those clutches are damaged. Which brings us to the second symptom, and this one's even more common. Symptom number 2, delayed harsh shifts, the gear slam. You're sitting at a red light, the light turns green, you press the gas and the car accelerates smoothly in first gear. Then, instead of a smooth transition into second gear, there's a pause, maybe a full second, followed by a violent jolt that feels like someone rear-ended you. This is called a shift flare, followed by a hard engagement. The root cause is the solenoid isn't opening quickly enough. Transmission fluid pressure builds up behind the closed valve. When the solenoid finally does open, either because the computer sent a stronger signal or because the pressure forced it, all that built-up fluid rushes through at once. The result is a sudden, aggressive gear engagement. You'll notice this most during cold starts. Transmission fluid thickens when cold, making it harder for a weak or dirty solenoid to move. That's why many drivers report that the harsh shifting goes away after 5 to 10 minutes of driving once the fluid warms up. Here's your test. Pay attention to the first few shifts of the day. If they're harsh, but the problem improves as the car warms up, you're dealing with a solenoid that's sticking due to contamination or weak electrical function. Common error code you might see is P0751, which stands for Shift Solenoid A Performance or Stuck Off. This code doesn't always trigger the check engine light right away, which is why scanning your car preemptively can catch this early. Now, if those first two symptoms sound manageable, the next one is where things get serious. Symptom number 3, getting stuck in one gear, limp mode. This is your transmission's emergency response. You're driving, and suddenly the car refuses to shift out of second or third gear. Acceleration from a stop is painfully slow. On the highway, the engine is screaming at 4,000 RPM or higher, but the car won't go faster than 45 miles per hour. Your dashboard lights up with a check engine light or an AT warning light. AT stands for automatic transmission. Welcome to limp mode, also called fail-safe mode. Here's what happened. The transmission control module detected that a shift solenoid completely stopped responding. Maybe it's electrically dead. Maybe it's mechanically stuck. Either way, the computer can't trust the transmission to shift properly anymore. To prevent catastrophic damage, like the transmission trying to engage 2 gears at once, the computer overrides everything and locks the transmission into a single, mechanically safe gear. Usually, this is second gear on most vehicles because it provides a balance. Enough torque to get moving from a stop, but not so much speed that you're dangerous on the road. Scan the computer immediately. You'll almost certainly see codes in the P0750 to P0770 range. Each solenoid has its own code. For example, P0750 means shift solenoid A malfunction. P0755 is shift solenoid B malfunction. P0760 is shift solenoid C malfunction. Do not keep driving in limp mode for days. Yes, the car is drivable, but you're forcing the transmission to operate outside its design parameters. The fluid overheats. The single-engaged clutch pack wears out exponentially faster. A tow truck costs $100. A replacement transmission costs $3,500 or more. Let me show you what happens when you ignore limp mode and keep driving. That takes us to symptom number 4. Symptom number 4, the RPM spike with no power. Transmission slip. You're accelerating onto the highway. You press the gas pedal. The engine revs up to 3,500 RPM, but the car barely gains speed. The engine sounds like it's working hard, but the power isn't reaching the wheels efficiently. This is transmission slip, and it's one of the most commonly misdiagnosed symptoms. Here's the difference between slipping caused by a bad solenoid versus slipping caused by worn clutches. Solenoid-induced slip is inconsistent. It happens randomly. One day the car drives fine, the next day, third gear slips. The day after that, it's second gear. If your clutches were actually worn out, the slipping would be consistent and progressive, getting worse every day in the same gears. What's happening mechanically is the failing solenoid isn't maintaining steady hydraulic pressure on the clutch pack. The pressure fluctuates. When it drops too low, the clutch can't grip the transmission's rotating components tightly enough. They slip against each other like a slipping manual clutch. Test this during moderate acceleration. Not flooring it, just steady, normal acceleration. If the RPMs jump without a corresponding increase in speed, and this happens randomly across different gears or different days, that points toward a solenoid issue rather than mechanical wear. The warning here is slipping generates friction. Friction generates heat. Heat breaks down transmission fluid. Once the fluid is cooked, it stops protecting the clutches and you end up with actual mechanical damage. A $300 solenoid replacement job, including labor, turns into an $1,800 clutch pack replacement. And here's where things get even more expensive if you don't catch it. The heat from that slipping doesn't just stay in the transmission. Symptom number 5, the engine overheating warning, transmission heat. Your temperature gauge suddenly spikes, or your car's engine warning light comes on. You check the coolant level, it's fine. The radiator fans are running. What's going on? On many vehicles, the transmission cooler is integrated into the engine's radiator. When your transmission is slipping or shifting erratically due to a bad solenoid, it's generating excessive heat. That heat gets transferred to the engine cooling system, and here's the chain reaction. A faulty solenoid causes improper shifting. Improper shifting causes clutch slippage. Slippage generates friction heat. Transmission fluid heats up to 280 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. That superheated fluid flows through the cooler inside your radiator. Your engine cooling system struggles to dissipate both engine heat and transmission heat. The temperature gauge climbs. Modern cars have a dedicated transmission temperature sensor. If your car has a digital display, check the transmission temp reading. Normal operating temperature is 175 to 225 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're seeing 250 degrees or higher, your transmission is overheating. Older vehicles without dedicated transmission temp displays might show this as an engine overheat, even though the real culprit is transmission heat. If you notice overheating combined with any of the shifting symptoms we've discussed, delayed shifts, harsh engagement, slipping, test the solenoids before you assume it's a radiator or water pump problem. Now, while overheating is dramatic and gets your attention, there's a more subtle symptom that most people completely miss. Symptom number 6, sudden drop in fuel economy. You're filling up the tank more often. You used to get 28 miles per gallon on the highway. Now you're barely hitting 22 miles per gallon. You haven't changed your driving habits. What's happening? A failing shift solenoid can trap your transmission in the wrong gear for the driving conditions. For example, if the solenoid responsible for engaging overdrive, your transmission's highest gear, is stuck closed, your transmission never shifts into that fuel-efficient top gear. You're stuck in 4th gear when you should be in 6th. The engine has to spin faster to maintain highway speed. Higher RPMs mean more fuel consumption. Or the opposite happens. The transmission keeps hunting between gears, shifting up and down repeatedly because the solenoid is sending inconsistent pressure signals. All that shifting creates mechanical drag, wasting energy. Compare your current fuel economy to what your car normally achieves. A drop of 10 to 15% or more without changes to tire pressure, driving style, or added weight can indicate a transmission control issue. This symptom is subtle. Most people don't notice it until they've been tracking fuel economy for weeks. But it's often the earliest warning sign, appearing before harsh shifts or slipping become obvious. And speaking of early warning signs, we've covered 6 symptoms so far. But before we get to symptom number 7, I need to tell you about the single biggest mistake that causes shops to misdiagnose this problem and cost you hundreds of dollars you don't need to spend. Here's the truth that costs drivers hundreds. Many symptoms of a failing shift solenoid are identical to the symptoms of low or contaminated transmission fluid. Harsh shifting could be low fluid, could be a solenoid. Slipping could be burnt fluid, could be a solenoid. Delayed engagement could be old fluid, could be a solenoid. Here's where the misdiagnosis happens. A less experienced technician sees these symptoms, checks the fluid, it's low or dark, and immediately recommends a transmission fluid flush for $250 to $400. You agree because it sounds reasonable. They replace the fluid. The car drives better for a few days, then the symptoms come back. Now they say the valve body needs to be replaced. That's $800 to $1,200 in parts and labor. You're frustrated, but you agree. They replace the valve body. The symptoms improve slightly, but something still isn't right. What they never did was test the electrical resistance of the shift solenoids. A proper diagnosis takes 15 minutes and uses a $30 multimeter. Each solenoid has a specified resistance range, typically 10 to 30 ohms depending on the manufacturer. When a solenoid fails electrically, its resistance drops to near zero or climbs to infinity. A quick test tells you definitively whether the solenoid is functional. Here's what you need to ask before agreeing to any transmission work. Did you test the resistance on all the shift solenoids? If the shop says no, or if they look confused by the question, you're dealing with someone who's guessing, not diagnosing. A real technician checks 4 things in this order. First, transmission fluid level and condition. That's free, takes 5 minutes. Second, error codes with a scan tool, another 5 minutes. Third, live data from the transmission control module showing solenoid command versus response, 10 minutes. Fourth, electrical resistance test on each solenoid, 15 minutes. That diagnostic process costs $80 to $150 at most shops. It saves you from $800 to $2,000 in unnecessary repairs. Now, armed with that knowledge, let's get back to the remaining symptoms, starting with the most obvious one. Symptom number 7, the check engine light. Error code deep dive. The check engine light is your transmission's way of screaming for help. When a shift solenoid fails, the transmission control module logs a diagnostic trouble code. Not all codes turn the light on immediately. Some failures have to happen multiple times before the light triggers, but solenoid codes are usually persistent. Here are the most common codes you'll see. P0750 shift solenoid, a malfunction. P0751 shift solenoid, a performance or stuck off. P0752 shift solenoid A stuck on. P0753 shift solenoid A electrical. Then you have P0755 through P0759 for shift solenoid B with the same fault types, and P0760 through P0764 for shift solenoid C with the same fault types. Each code tells you something specific. Malfunction means the computer can't communicate with the solenoid at all. Performance means the solenoid is responding, but too slowly or inconsistently. Stuck off means the solenoid isn't opening when commanded. Stuck on means the solenoid isn't closing when commanded. Electrical means there's a wiring problem, short circuit, broken wire, or corroded connector. You can read these codes yourself with a basic OBD2 scanner that costs $25 to $40. Plug it into the port under your dashboard, usually near the steering column. Turn the key to the on position with the engine off. The scanner will display any stored codes. If you see any code starting with P075 through P076, you're looking at a shift solenoid issue. But codes alone don't tell the whole story. Sometimes you can hear the problem before you see the code. Symptom number 8, whining and grinding noises. You hear a high-pitched whine that changes with vehicle speed, not engine RPM. Or, during shifts, there's a brief grinding or clunking sound. Here's what's happening. When a solenoid fails, gears can partially engage without full hydraulic pressure. Metal components that should be fully locked together are instead lightly touching and slipping. That creates friction noise, the whine or grind. This is different from a pump whine, which is constant and related to engine RPM, or bearing noise, which is a rumble or growl. Solenoid-related noise is tied to shifting events. You hear it right as the car changes gears or when it's trying to engage a gear and failing. Pay attention to when the noise occurs. During the 1 to 2 shift, that's likely solenoid A or B. During the 2 to 3 shift, likely solenoid B or C. Constant whining that gets louder with speed might be a transmission pump issue, not a solenoid. If the noise is accompanied by harsh shifting or slipping, the solenoid is the prime suspect. If it's noise alone with no shifting symptoms, you might be looking at worn bearings or a pump problem. And if you're hearing noises, there's a good chance you're also smelling something you shouldn't. Symptom number 9, the burning smell. You smell something burning, like hot metal or burning rubber coming from under the car. It's not engine oil. That smells thick and acrid. It's not coolant. That smells sweet. This smells like overheated transmission fluid. Fresh transmission fluid is bright red and almost odorless. When it gets too hot, usually above 275 degrees Fahrenheit, it oxidizes and turns dark brown or black. It also develops a distinct burnt smell. A failing solenoid causes this by creating excessive clutch slippage. The friction material in the clutch packs is made of organic compounds mixed with metal fibers. When those clutches slip under load, they generate tremendous heat. That heat cooks the fluid and burns the friction material itself. Here's your test. Check the transmission dipstick if your car has one. Pull it out, wipe it clean, reinsert it fully, then pull it out again. Look at the fluid. Bright red and transparent means fluid is healthy. dark red or brown means fluid is old but might still be functional. Black or brown with a burnt smell means fluid is cooked. Damage has already occurred. If you smell burning and the fluid is black, you need immediate service. Continuing to drive accelerates internal damage. The burnt fluid has lost its lubrication properties and metal-on-metal contact is happening inside the transmissions. So we've covered 9 symptoms. You know what to look for. You know what questions to ask shops. Now comes the big decision. Can you fix this yourself or do you need a professional? You've identified the symptoms. You have error codes pointing to a shift solenoid. Now what? Can you replace this yourself? The answer depends entirely on 2 factors, your car's design and your comfort level. Let's start with external solenoids. These are the DIY-friendly ones. Some transmissions, especially older Honda, Acura, and some Toyota models, have solenoids mounted on the outside of the transmission case. You can access them by simply removing a cover or electrical connector. No fluid draining required. Tools you'll need are a socket set, torque wrench, and the new solenoid, which runs $40 to $100 per unit. Time-wise, plan for 1 to 2 hours if this is your first time doing it. Total DIY cost $75 to $150. Now, internal solenoids. This is where professionals are recommended. Most modern vehicles, anything built after 2005, have solenoids inside the transmission oil pan. To reach them, you must lift the car safely, drain 4 to 6 quarts of transmission fluid, remove the pan, and this is messy because fluid spills. Then remove the valve body or filter, replace the solenoid, reinstall everything with a new pan gasket, refill with the exact manufacturer specification fluid, and torque all bolts to specification. One mistake. Wrong torque on a valve body bolt, reusing an old gasket, or using the wrong fluid can cause leaks or shifting problems worse than what you started with. Professional cost runs $350 to $700 depending on location and vehicle complexity. Go the DIY route. If the solenoid is externally accessible, you have a quality torque wrench and metric sockets, you're comfortable working under a car, and you've successfully done similar repairs like an oil change or brake job. Go to a professional if the solenoid is internal, your car has all-wheel drive, because drive shafts complicate access. You're not confident in fluid specifications or the transmission has over 100,000 miles. In that case, consider replacing multiple solenoids at once, plus a filter service. There's also a middle ground option. Some independent shops will let you bring your own parts. Buy the manufacturer's original equipment solenoid, not a cheap aftermarket version, online for $50 to $80. Then pay the shop $150 to $250 for labor only. You save money on parts markup without risking a DIY mistake. If you're experiencing any combination of these symptoms, harsh shifts, slipping, stuck gears, burning smells, or that phantom neutral drop, don't let a shop guess their way through your wallet. Start with the basics. Scan for codes. Check your fluid level and condition. If you get solenoid-related codes in the P0750 to P0770 range, you now know what questions to ask before you agree to a transmission flush, a valve body replacement, or any major work. Ask this one question. Did you test the electrical resistance on the shift solenoids? That one question separates real diagnostics from expensive guessing. If you found this helpful, here's what to watch next. My video on how to check transmission fluid the right way, because half the low fluid diagnoses out there are wrong from the start. That video is linked on screen now. Subscribe if you want to keep your car running without getting taken advantage of. I post new videos every week breaking down the repair shops overcharged for and the simple fixes they won't tell you about. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.